We're here at the AES show in New York on the Plugin Alliance booth with Dan, who's going to show us the new Brainworx BX console. So, Dan, what's this all about then?
So the BX console is actually an emulation of Dirk Ulrich's Neve VXS console. He's been using this console for years in all of his recordings as a producer. He also uses it every time that he does a plugin emulation of one of our numerous titles.
Right, okay.
So what makes this console emulation special isn't just the fact that it's a great modeling of the console channel strip itself, but that it uses something new called tolerance modeling technology. This means that when the engineers at Brainworx modeled every single component of one channel strip, that's 150 components, capacitors and resistors, they took into account the manufacturer's tolerance ranges for each one of these components. This can vary between 1% and 15% depending on how important the component is. When they had that all mapped down, they took that schematic and mapped 72 different channels within one plugin. So in this plugin, channels 1 through 72 are going to exhibit very different characteristics between the EQ module, the compressor module. You're going to get a slightly different phase sound, you're going to get some analog depth, a little bit of width, several nonlinearities that come into play that actually give it that analog character that we try to look for when, modeling analog gear.
Right, okay. So is this something you can switch on and off, or is this sort of baked in?
Basically, you can switch it on and off. You can, say, build an entire mix like what I have here with channel 1 on every instantiation of your console.
Right.
And that's all well and good. That's basically what a lot of channel strips already do. But what I did here was I made an entire mix with channels 1 through 72.
Okay.
Depending on which channel is kind of better or worse for a sound, because again, like a real console, kick drum might be better on channel 3, snare drum might be better on channel 12.
Sure.
That kind of experiment for it.
Okay, so in terms of the way that actually sounds, should we give it a quick listen then, the differences between those different things?
Absolutely. So, obviously the best way to get a really good understanding of what difference it actually makes is to download the 14-day full function demo and listen for yourself.
Sure.
Let me give you a demonstration of actually how noise is affected when it's getting passed through the BX console and you switch through channels. So here we have this preset called Broken Channel A, which is kind of a funny little thing we named it. It's actually using the virtual noise floor of the VXS that we've modeled, which you can turn completely off if you want to have a very clean sound. But for this purpose, I've turned it all the way up, compressed the hell out of it, and listen to what happens to the timbre as I step through these channel numbers.
Okay. Well, so there's a marked change in the high frequency and in phase there. You can hear that quite clearly.
Exactly. So you imagine when you're putting that on vocals that are really washed out in reverb, maybe some air in the upper registers, or say the snare on the bottom of a snare. You can really hear a little bit of difference in the width and the depth of the mix that you're going to create. So all these nonlinearities kind of build up throughout a mix when you use several different channels.
So when you actually went about making this thing then, did you aim to have each one of these different channels mirror what's on the original desk, or is it just sort of randomly generating?
Right, not exactly. It is, we like to call it intelligent randomization.
Okay.
So what you're going to get with this plugin is basically along the lines of what a Neve VXS would sound like when it rolls off the factory floor. It's going to have the same variation between each channel strip, but it's not the exact modeling of every single channel strip in the console that we modeled.
Okay, right. And are there sort of particular channels that when you start playing with it, you immediately realize are better for one thing or another, or do you sort of tell people maybe try channel 62 for bass or whatever it is?
I think that really depends on personal preference. I can tell you that people have demoed it and made videos for us where they run, for example, a kick drum through the plugin without any settings altered, and then put a phase scope on the outside to see exactly what the kick drum's looking like through different channels. And sometimes the virtual gain noise floor comes into play, which kind of can then interact with the channel number and give you a little bit, different character, different flavor you might be looking for. So it's going to, again, be a matter of personal preference. I've got my kick drum on channel 3 because that's the first one I found that, sounded pretty good to me.
Okay.
But again, it's going to involve some pretty critical listening and, contextual relevance, basically.
So are you kind of looking for this to be a thing that's going to add that element of randomness to your production, where you can say, okay, this isn't necessarily what I originally intended, but this works and this is great?
Yeah, a little bit. And there's always kind of the debate on how much imperfection do you want in a recording to give it, that character that you're going for. And a lot of people like to think that analog equipment has that character, some better than others, and that's why some analog companies, some hardware companies will build equipment that has very low tolerances between each of their components, so that they get the most pristine sound possible. So it really depends on what you're going for, I think.
And also, for each different section of the channel strip then, because we've got, a compressor, an EQ section, what else is there even on there?
There's a compressor, a gate, EQ section. Actually, there's a lot of modifications on this plugin that weren't on the original console, if you want me to talk about those.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So we've got in the compressor section, of most importance, a high-pass filter for the sidechain, which is really handy when you want to filter out low frequencies, obviously, to get some good compression on the higher stuff. Mix knob, which will allow for some parallel compression. The second release knob right here is actually a very handy function because it helps you prevent pumping. On the original console, I believe this is set to 20 dB below your threshold level. On an 88R, for example, it's set to 40 dB. This is actually sweepable from 10 dB to 60 dB.
Okay.
So you can set a lower threshold below the threshold you've set for your compressor, which allows the release behavior to change to a slower pattern. So say you have like a tail, right after a really heavily compressed snare drum, it's going to be a little bit more gentle on that tail, so that you don't get any artifacts that you don't
Can
want.
we hear that?
Right here, no.
Okay.
You can't. It's a very subtle thing. It's highly program dependent.
But you can get the trial and hear it for yourself.
Get the trial, download it for yourself.
Okay, great. So how much does it cost then, and when's it available?
It's $2.99 right now, and it was released this Tuesday.
Super. Okay. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you.